So I'm doing my research on Michael Jordan, and man, I'm finding some stories that I either one, forgot about, or two, did not know about, or contextualizing some things that have been talked about, but nobody is, I say nobody, folks that should know aren't really opening up the details of it because we're in this moment of, frankly, hagiography going on for Michael Jordan, and anybody who seems to have something negative to say about his time as a Chicago Bull is being shouted down, right? And also there, you see Michael Jordan and Scottie Pippen are dumping on a guy who's been dead for 3 years in Jerry Krause and can't defend himself. That said, I picked up Sam Smith's Jordan Rules a couple weeks ago, and I moved on to Second Coming, which is his book about Jordan's return after playing baseball for a year. And there's some fascinating stuff in the baseball part of this, but the part that was always interesting, at least to me, is the conspiracy that David Stern had told Michael Jordan he needed to retire from the NBA because of his gambling. So I'm going, man, everybody keeps talking about this gambling and how Jordan liked to gamble while playing golf and poker online. He had a laptop playing poker online in the 90s, like early 90s, back when there were only a handful of us still doing that. And, you know, what you do within the legal bounds is your business, except when you're a public figure, right? And that's the part that Jordan always despised. So the part about the gambling where we get specific is really in the preface of this book. And Sam Smith talks about how Jordan had planned a gambling golf weekend with convicted drug dealer James Slim Bowler, at whose money laundering trial Jordan would later have to testify. And this was a high stakes weekend of $10,000 per hole in these golf matches, and actually required a banker, a bail bondsman named Eddie Dow, who was later murdered by associates, to actually, make sure that the money was where the money was supposed to be while they're playing. When checks signed by Jordan showed up in Dow's estate a few months later, the truth began to be revealed, but Jordan didn't announce his golf trip as his excuse for skipping attending the White House. Jordan didn't want to attend the White House with the Chicago Bulls to celebrate winning an NBA title so he could go play golf with a convicted drug dealer. All right, so there's a look. And his excuse wasn't, as I said, the golf trip. The excuse was that he had met George Bush when he was vice president, and he saw no reason to have to go see him once again. Now, so on top of the been there, done that excuse for covering up playing golf or just not going to the White House, for which today we have athletes who are roundly shunned and roundly yelled at and shouted down if they decide they don't want to visit the White House after achieving a great height, whether it be Major League Baseball, women's soccer, the NBA, NFL, whatever. It has become a point of contention. But Jordan was doing this back in 91. And it wasn't the Chicago Sun-Times or the Chicago Tribune that was uncovering these facts about the gambling and about whose company Jordan was keeping. It was actually the hometown papers. He's from Wilmington, North Carolina. The Charlotte Observer reported that federal officials had seized $57,000 from James Bowler, the guy who's going to play golf with for $10,000 a hole, and money he claimed he had won from Michael Jordan during a golf weekend the previous October, right? So, and any fodder that you can use on Michael Jordan, you're going to use, especially when you remember that his own teammates didn't really like him as a person. So when they found this out, they started calling him stuff like Five Card Charlie, or as Scottie Pippen and Horace Grant called him, Scarface. But you also need to remember that Jordan was so biting in his wit and trash talking of his own teammates that this scandal not only would affect him publicly, but in the locker room. The man called Will Purdue Will Vanderbilt because he said he did not deserve to be named after a Big Ten school. The man walked up to Stacey King. Yes, That's Stacey King, the one that played at Oklahoma, played center for the Chicago Bulls, saw Stacey King had a bag in his hand and said, hey, did you go buy yourself some game? Believing that that was a good joke to make about Stacey King, who was holding a bag. And then my favorite of these slights, going up to Horace Grant after a tough playoff loss on the airplane, picking up Horace Grant's dinner tray and making off with it, and then yelling back over his shoulder, you didn't play well enough to eat. Look, man, we could talk about Michael Jordan being the greatest basketball player of all time. We could talk about what he has achieved as an owner and being really the only former professional athlete to be a majority owner in any major sports franchise. We could talk about the Jumpman brand, for which I own the shoes, and I love the shoes. We could talk about him carrying a team full of crackheads to the playoffs in the early 80s. We could talk about Isaiah Thomas freezing him out of the All-Star game, but the part that gets left out of that story is that Michael Jordan loved Isaiah and wanted to tell him that, and felt kind of sheepish walking up to Isaiah to tell him how good he was. Isaiah didn't see him as a fan, he saw him as a rival. And he didn't shake a rival's hand. And Michael Jordan, like many of y'all, would remember that slight forever. You know, like I remember my parents spending their hard-earned money to drive my behind to Houston from Hattiesburg, Mississippi, so we could watch the Astros play the Dodgers. And my parents put up who knows how much money to get this done. And they also helped me leave in the 7th inning of the game to get down to where the Dodgers were going to be walking out of hours later when the game ended, so I would have an opportunity to get Mike Piazza and Hideo Nomo to sign my ball. Both of those dudes walked right past us children, holding out baseballs. I have, as you can see, never forgotten that. So I can only imagine if I'm Michael Jordan and I wanted to talk to Isaiah Thomas, and Isaiah Thomas treated me like nothing and then froze me out of the All-Star game. Yeah, I wouldn't forget either. And I would use that. But when we talk about being the bigger person and we talk about turning the other cheek, how come we never talk about Michael Jordan? You know, many of us would teach our children, hey, look, the only time you put your hands on somebody is if they put their hands on you, right? You need to learn to let that grudge go. You need to be the bigger person. We tell it to our children all the time. Matter of fact, we got the joke about being Jesus. The joke being, hey, which one of y'all would do what Jesus do? And then the child who wants just to have what they want goes to the other child and said, you be Jesus, right? I mean, it's real hard, but it is a lesson you're supposed to learn. Apparently, Michael Jordan didn't learn it. We want to talk about where he came from nothing. Both his parents had good jobs. His mom worked at a bank. All right? The man didn't want for anything. The dude tried a job of manual labor, maintenance at North Carolina and decided he couldn't do it because he thought it was beneath him, and then begged reporters not to tell that story. You know, I mean, all of this on top of gambling. Now, again, who you keep company with speaks to who you are. And the fact that it turns into a group project every time Michael Jordan gets on the court ought to mean something to y'all and ought to mean something to him. And for those of you that don't know what I'm talking about, you weren't the smart person in the group project, because the smart person in the group project immediately picked up what I'm talking about, which is that you look to the smart person in the group project to get the group project done when it's time to get the thing done, while the rest of y'all are just over there doing whatever it is y'all doing. I'm telling you, I had some crappy partners, especially in human net and physiology. I'm in there with Spotwood and Ricky Wilson. Yeah, I'm naming names, and I'm doing the work. I hated group projects, right? But you doing a group project, you feel some kind of way about it. Every team Michael Jordan was ever on is a group project. Problem is, some of those cats are really good because Spotwood and Ricky know who they are. They graduated. They know who they are. We were all in that summer class together. They can find me. You know, matter of fact, they want to dispute it, call up the station. Anyway, I'm pointing these things out because Michael Jordan's really good at playing basketball. Turns out, wasn't really good at that other athletic endeavor that he tried to go do. And the fact that Michael Jordan could even get an opportunity to play with the Birmingham Barons speaks to just how people will treat you if they revere you. If you get into this space of being a hero god. When you get into this place where it becomes blasphemous to say something wrong about you. I point out to folks that Michael Jordan played golf with the enemy the night before he dropped 63 on him, and how the same folks who tell us that this generation of NBA players are soft because they're all friends and they play with each other will twist themselves in knots to say Danny Ainge wasn't a threat, or to say, Michael Jordan's playing head games with Danny Ainge. Y'all will say anything to make it true for your narrative, when the facts on the ground are a bit different here. And facts don't care about your feelings. You can appreciate what Michael Jordan was able to do on a basketball court, but you can also leave it there. Because the more that we dig into this dude, the more you find out he is as human as any teenage mean girl. Matter of fact, put him in the movie with Lindsay Lohan. It'll fit. It'll work just fine. All right, Mayberry, I'm through with the rant. And we could talk about Spotwood and Ricky if you want to, but again, they know where I'm at.